Good morning. It's so good to be here with you on this morning. This morning I've been tasked in a few short minutes to talk about reparations as sacred repair, why mental, physical, and as you saw that I'm a clergy, I'm going to add spiritual because that adds to the other components, harm, demand, justice. And so for too long, America has avoided confronting the ongoing wounds of slavery and systemic racism. And so my goal this morning with this presentation is to examine why reparations represents not charity as it's often sold as, but sacred repair, the moral and practical necessity of healing generational trauma that continues to devastate Black communities. And so we're going to look at three key dimensions briefly: physical violence that spans centuries, even until this day, psychological warfare designed to break spirits, and we are still dealing with that to this day, and the spiritual desecration that attempted to sever our connection to the divine. So this is not a proselytizing moment. I'm just aiming at the years of having white Jesus on our walls has impacted us, all right? The time for half measures and hallowed apologies has passed. Justice delayed is denied. Mic check 1, 2. And the bill for America's moral depth grows with each passing day. Let's take something practical: maternal morality crisis. And so since I have to do harm, let me say to my other speakers, there's going to be some overlap, but I stayed out of y'all pool as much as I can. All right, Dr. Chajua? All right, brother, I tried to stay out of y'all pool, but there's going to be some overlap. But let's talk about something tangible. Maternal morality crisis. Black women are 3 to 4 more times likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women, regardless of education or income. And this ain't ancient history. This is not an accident. This is systemic neglect rooted in centuries of medical racism, like drapetomania, saying they're wanting to run away as a medical case. Do we all know that OBGYN, gynecology, that's a field of medicine built on the backs of experimenting on Black women during chattel slavery? When Serena Williams, one of the world's greatest athletes with access to the best medical care, nearly dies from complications that doctors initially dismissed. Serena Williams almost died giving birth. She's a billionaire. She ain't common, folks. She got good health care, and they were like, nah, ain't nothing wrong. That's medical racism, has its roots in slavery. How many of us, especially sisters, have been to the doctor? I know my wife is going through some things, and she recently, Commissioner, kept telling the doctor I'm in pain. And he kept saying, nah, you good. Until I stood my 6'2", 300+ pound up and said, she says she in pain. And so it was once said that doctors are to Black women what the police are to Black men. Doctors are to Black women what police are to Black men. You don't feel our pain, don't see humanity, and treat like chattel. I'm going to the next slide. Keep the camera moving. What we're addressing. So we're going to talk about physical harm, violence against Black bodies through slavery, lynching, medical experimentation. We just talked about that. Ongoing police brutality, the systemic destruction of Black flesh as a tool of racial terror, mental harm, psychological warfare designed to break Black minds and spirits, the separation of culture, erasure, and the implementation about lies of Black inferiority continue to poison our communities. And this is why we struggle to tell our babies there's a life beyond, right? This comes from slavery. You will never rise above here. And so we even practice that to this day. Don't look it, I'm 50, but I'm of an age where when I went off to college, I was both affirmed and reminded not to get too big for myself by my uncle. He affirmed me, hey, I'm glad you're going to that university. Don't come back thinking you better. And that's grounded not in just keeping you humble, but this nascent inferiority complex that keeps bubbling up. And spiritual harm, again, we're going to talk about the murder of Black souls. Next slide. So physical harm, the body as the battleground. 240 years of enslavement, and that's just a raw estimate. We dealt with whipping, branding, mutilization. The torture of enslaved people served multiple purposes: punishments, intimidations, and the marking of human beings. And then it showed up in our community by something we call whoopings, right? And that starts because mama had to do it, so Overseer John wouldn't. And we kept that going. My sister, thank you so much. Amen. Give her a round of applause. Black women gonna fix it. Amen. We talk about whipping, branding, mutilization. Your body's not your own. Your body is property. We talk about systemic rape and forced breeding. Whether you wanted to have a baby or not as a black woman, you had to have a child. Recently in Georgia, there was a sister kept on life support. She was brain dead, her body was dead, but they kept her to incubate a baby because you're going to have this baby, right? And so they claim it's about protecting the lives of the children, but in fact, it's more, you're gonna have this baby, you're gonna have this black body, which is gonna be used as labor for our system. And of course, we talked about miracle experimentation without consent. Even back then, experimenting on African Americans. And of course, we all know the case of Henrietta Lacks. We all know the Tuskegee experiment. We know these things that have been done. I'm a hospital chaplain by trade, and I promise you, we're the first ones they offer the experimental drugs to. They don't offer us the stuff that we know is tried and true. We got an experimental drug we'd like for you to try. And so my mother was a nurse, and one of the things she taught me was say no to the experimental drugs. And so these are the kind of miracle experiments. Physical harm after slavery, the violence continued. Over 4,000 documented lynchings between 1877, the technical end of Reconstruction, to 1950. Public spectacles of torture, murder, designed to terrorize entire communities. Postcards were made from lynching. They recently found out, I think it was in Evanston or one of the North Chicago suburbs, that this famous postcard was one of lynching. We know convict leasing systems, slavery by another name. The 13th Amendment writes this in there, that you can still be a slave if you are a prisoner. And so they rent out your labor, prison labor. So a lot of the clothes we wear, we know the old license plate pressing, but now it's into clothing, it's into labor, it's into working, the telemarketers, convict leasing system. We know about the Tuskegee experiment. All of this has its roots in implementation in the system of chattel slavery, and of course, forced sterilizations. Over 60,000 black Americans sterilized against their will, which black women are disproportionately targeted. And so Mississippi appendectomies became code for hysterectomies performed without consent. Physical harm today, the pastor's prologue. Again, we talked about the maternal morality crisis. I won't stay there. Police violence. We struggle with talking about this. Police violence. We all know what happened in 2020, the summer of 2020, when it exploded, when George Floyd was murdered, but that's nothing new. In fact, police brutality is nothing new. We just have the means to document it. But a lot of our movements, like the Black Panthers and things like that, start in response to state-sanctioned violence, right? And even in these spaces, I love Champaign-Urbana. Sometimes our first, not in Champaign, but sometimes in our first space is lock them up, right? And so we wrestle with this notion of police violence, which grows out of the old patty roller system, the old overseer system. Environmental racism, from Flint's flows in water to the cancer alleys, toxic air. And I'm from the south side of Chicago, Commissioners, 81st and Troop. We all know what happened when we get by Olive Harvey College. When you start rolling your windows up, and you turn your air filters off, because you're gonna smell it, right? I remember being a student at Olive Harvey College, and I was about 19, and I was thirsty. I got some water, and somebody said, don't drink the water out this water fountain, because we have those landmines by us. And so black communities bear the brunt of environmental hazards. Our neighborhoods become sacrifice zones for corporate profit. And of course, I'm not gonna keep hammering on the medical neglect, but I wanna move us to mental harm, the attempted murder of the black mind. Families are deliberately separated. Our panelists beforehand talked about that. Names and languages erased. Names and languages erased. We were not allowed to use our names. We were not allowed to speak our native language. That was a core part of our identity, and it was erased. Cultural genocide. African spiritual practices, storytelling traditions, and cultural knowledge systems were violently suppressed. Suddenly, the oral tradition becomes less, and it becomes about the written tradition. Suddenly, the drum ceased to be a viable communication tool. And so all of these things impact us today, which is why we only accept written reports, right? We don't accept oral reports. If you didn't write it down, it's not done. All of that kind of deals with the impact of chattel slavery on us. And the big lie, you're less than human. Trauma in the DNA. And my mentor is gonna argue with me about this one. I love him, we'll fight over some whiskey, but trauma does show up in our DNA. Modern science has confirmed that black communities have always known trauma lives in the body and passes through generations. The constant stress of surviving racism literally rewrites our DNA code, creating biological disadvantages that compound over time. And so we talk about epigenetics. There's a lot of debate about epigenetics. I am somewhere in the middle, but the reality is there's something to the fact that trauma is passed on to our children and grandchildren, either through our DNA, but also our cultural apparition. So for years, I never understood this notion of you gotta be in before the street lights come on. And then it was finally explained to me the past couple of years by an older aunt, where we grew up, you didn't want to be out after dark. Anything happened. And it didn't happen from us, it happened from folks coming into the community, folks. So being by the street, like little things that we don't think about turn into these cultural prisons. The modesty, you didn't want to dress a certain way because you didn't entice Master John, who would then rape you. And so now these things kind of become cultural norms, not for repression, but for protection, right? And we have to start looking at that. So we talk about the rates of PTSD. Every brother in here under the age of 55, hey man, we get paranoid when the police pull up behind us. We do, because it's something to that. I don't know how this is gonna go. Rates of hypertension in Black adults linked to chronic stress and discrimination. I can't get the medical care I need to handle my diabetes, my sugar. Years of shorter life expectancy for Black Americans compared to white Americans. As a hospital chaplain, I'm not gonna lie, I get mad sometimes because folks living to be 100, 105, and my uncle died at 58 from hypertension and stress. It becomes frustrating. And of course, spiritual harm. I told y'all we're gonna talk about this because there's something about that white Jesus on the wall. There's something about saying I'm Black but beautiful that has impacted generations, right? So we've been severed from our African ancestral spiritual practices. We have lost our names and language. Christianity has been weaponized, and we see it now as we look up with this rise of white Christian nationalism, which is nothing more than the slaveocracy rebranded, right? This is why they love Charlie Kirk so much, because he was one of their chief promoters of this white Christian nationalism that said that the Africans, the curse of Ham, is inferior, and sacred worth denied. And so spiritual violence of slavery created a crisis of meaning that persists today. When people are told they have no sacred worth, their spiritual practices are dehumanized. When the very humanity is questioned, this creates wounds that go deeper or psychological trauma. It attacks the very core of what makes life meaningful. Yet in the midst of spiritual violence, our ancestors found ways to maintain the connection to the sacred. And so hush harbors, right? The way we flipped and used the Bible, the way we recreated this thing to give us liberation. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on here, catch me afterwards, but why reparations, right? There's a precedence. So when anybody tells you why reparations, first thing you need to know is that reparations has been paid in this country. The Japanese Americans got it after World War II. Native American tribes have got a form of it, not their full due, but they've been paid billions in land settlements and ongoing treaty obligations. And now, be clear, this is inadequate to the harm they've caused, but they've done something. Holocaust survivors, the state of Israel is a form of reparations. We don't like to say that, but that's what happened. We felt bad because we didn't stop Hitler. We'll give you your own nation and we'll pay for it for the rest of eternity. And even in the country, they got reparations. The victims of 9/11 were paid reparations because, again, harm was done. We didn't protect you. We'll give you reparations. Reparations is measurable, right? On the screen, as you can see, stolen labor value, I'll leave that to Dr. Chajua. We talked about the wealth gap, health disparity, educational losses. All of this is measurable. All of this is not abstract numbers. These things are measurable in qualitative and quantitative data. Why reparations? Because justice requirements. Again, if this professes to be a Christian nation, Leviticus 25 calls for the year of Jubilee, debts forgiven, enslaved people free, land returned to the original owners, and economic relationships reset. So this is the third reason. If we profess to be a moral and spiritual country, we have to reset in the year of Jubilee. I'm running out of time. This was longer than I thought it was. So reparations isn't charity, it's an overdue bill. And so what would reparations look like? Keep up with me. Direct cash payments, right? Debt cancellation, housing support, business development. It's not simply writing a check. As funny as that Dave Chappelle skit was, it's not simply handed, thank you, caught what I was talking about. It's not really simply just handing out $50 million to every Black person, but what would it look like in this county that deals with gun violence if we were to offer free child care to every person in the space? What will it look like? That means mama ain't got to work 3 or 4 jobs no more. That means daddy ain't got to work 3 and 4 jobs. What would it look like if we provided free health care, right? So when we talk about reparations, it's not just checks, it's different things that disproportionately impact African Americans. So we talked about some of these things. So just for my people in the room, and then I'm done after this because my 15 minutes are up, this conversation is now about proving we deserve repair. We already deserve it. Our humanity isn't up for debate. Our ancestors' suffering isn't up for debate. The debt owned ain't up for debate. We're not broken people needing to be fixed. We're wounded people needing justice. And that's a critical difference. Broken suggests something is wrong with us inherently. Wounded acknowledges something was done to us and that we can be healed with proper treatment. At this point, I am done. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless.